Welcome to episode 29 of the Empowering Ability podcast.
Welcome to the Empowering Ability podcast, where we get you and your loved ones impacted by disability the information needed to live a full and meaningful life. Now here's your host, Eric Gall.
Hey friends, welcome to the podcast. Excited to share this powerful story with you today. It's the story of Bill Hiltz. And during this podcast, Bill really teaches us some really key lessons of what people with disabilities are truly capable of. And we have a great conversation around the mindsets that we need to carry and people with disabilities need to carry to really empower themselves and for us to empower people with disabilities. So it's a really deep story. I think you're going to get a ton out of it. In the podcast, you're going to hear a couple of voices. You're going to hear Joyce, Balaz, and Arn Rowe, which are part of Team Bill, and Bill himself is nonverbal. So Joyce and Arn really carry and share Bill's story. Bill did answer some pre-recorded questions or some questions that I provided in advance that he gave answers to Joyce and Arn on. So you do truly get Bill's perspective in this podcast. I'm excited to share the interview with you. It's one of my favorites. You're really going to enjoy it. And as well, I share my perspective from meeting Bill and some of the assumptions that I had carried and how Bill really shattered those. And I get a little bit vulnerable with that. So I think you get some value to that as well. So here's Team Bill. Hey, Team Bill. Welcome to the Empowering Ability podcast.
Thanks for having us, Eric.
Hi, Eric.
Yeah, my pleasure. So we have on the podcast today Bill Hiltz, Joyce, Balaz, and Arn Rowe, and they make up Team Bill. And we met at Toronto Summer Institute, or TSI, in the summer of 2017. And I got the honor of getting to know these three and having some pretty deep conversations. And I was really fortunate to get to learn Bill's story. And it's a story that I feel is really important to share. So Joyce, Bill, and Arn are here to share Bill's story today and to have a great conversation that I think will be valuable to all of us. So I'm going to hand it over to Joyce and Arn to tell us a little bit about themselves, Team Bill, and Bill's story.
Thanks, Eric. So I guess the very first thing that we need to identify is that you're going to hear my voice and you're going to hear Arn's voice, but you won't hear Bill's voice in Bill's voice because Bill is nonverbal. So I think that poses a lot of challenges lots of times for people who try to get to know Bill. And I guess Bill was really thankful that you took the time, Eric, to sit with us because it does take time to get Bill's story and stuff like that. So it'll be probably pretty difficult in this limited time to give you Bill's whole story. But we can identify, first of all, that as we said, Bill is nonverbal and he faces many, many challenges in his life. But the best thing that I think everybody who gets to know Bill learns is that that's never going to keep him down, and he's going to do what he can to make life better for people in this world. So in sort of looking at Bill and the challenges that he faces, I think the biggest one isn't the fact that he's nonverbal, because he does manage to get that his messages across. But he has to deal with an uncontrolled seizure disorder that really rules his life. And so we never know from one minute to the next whether Bill's going to be able to do what he set his mind to doing that day. And that causes some challenges. But again, when you talk to people who know Bill, after a while, they will always use the word inspiration. And that's what I think of when I think of Bill, is that being able to tell his story is going to help others learn more about dealing with people with different disabilities and how important that term of inclusion really is. So in terms of who the team for Bill is, I'm a family home provider for Bill, and he's been living with me now for 21 years. And Arn is his intervener who provides the Along with personal supports, he also helps interpret the world for Bill and be there so that Bill can carry on to do what he needs to do. So together, all three of us sort of are Bill and helping Bill find the life that he wants. And Arn, you've been working with Bill for
10 years now.
10 years. So Bill is the oldest of 3 children. His parents were very young when he was born. There was a problem with birth that really caused the problems with the seizures. And the mom and dad tried really hard to support Bill the best they could, but with the lack of funding for families, they just didn't have the supports they needed. So they made the difficult decision to put Bill into foster care. So at about 1.5 years, they couldn't keep it up anymore because there were frequent trips to the hospital and everything else. So they just couldn't do it. And from there, Bill went into a number of foster families. That didn't work out very well. He was in the hospital for a while and then eventually ended up at Christopher Robin, which was an institution in Ajax. He was there till he was 8. And then I think as they were having to close down that institution, the family that took Bill in at that point had already taken somebody else out of that institution. And so they came back and visited with Bill, and he just charmed the heart out of them, and they took him home.
Mm-hmm. I think too it's important to know a little bit about Bill's time in that institution, which was mostly spent in a crib cage. So it had the 4 sides and a top on it, and he wore a helmet, and that was because he was banging his head on the bars, which he was trying to tell whoever would listen that he didn't want to be in there. And I just find that very disheartening and cruel, really, that that was the best that they had for Bill at that time.
Mm-hmm. That paints a pretty, I'm struggling to find the words, but it paints, it makes me feel sick to my stomach, right? Hearing that. And that was reality that Bill lived through.
Yeah. So, when he was adopted or taken in by the other family, like he was treated by that family like one of their own. And they just love him to death, right? Mm-hmm. It's just the way it is. When you get to know Bill, that's pretty much what happens. And so he lived with them for 12 years. And then at around age 18, 19, they thought it was a good transition year because not only the age-wise, but their family situation changed where they had 3 young boys and they were going off here and everywhere. And Father Richard was doing the main part of the care, and he became ill. So it was just a good time for transition. And having heard that, and Eric, you talk about feeling sick to your stomach. When I heard that they were looking for a new home for Bill, that's how I felt too, was like, oh my goodness, we've just opened up communication for Bill. Now they're going to take him to a new family. And because he was being served out of county, that meant that he would be moving out of county, so out of the school. So he would lose his family and his education and any gains that he'd made at the same time. And I just couldn't see that happen. And so we talked about it, and we gave it a couple of trial runs, and we figured that we made a good pair. So that's how we got together.
Mm-hmm. And how long had you been working with Bill at the school before that happened?
So I met him when he was 13, and so all the way till 21. So we were together for that 7 years. And 2 years before he finished school is when he came to live with me.
Awesome. Well, that says a lot about you and your character as well, Joyce, and the huge heart you have and the respect that you have for Bill.
Well, I know that I for me, I made the decision that Bill was going to, I knew that Bill was going to need somebody that could help him be him. And I knew that that's the role that I felt that I could do. And that's kind of what we are. So I like to think of Bill and I as a pair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, too, that Joyce basically devotes her whole life to Bill. And Bill is very fortunate to have her because I don't think you would find very many people that would try to give somebody else the best life possible, the way that Joyce has for Bill. And I know that Bill would agree with that statement.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that, Arn. I think Joyce is too humble to say that. So thank you. So, I mean, Bill has a very powerful story, and, all of your stories are powerful, combined as Team Bill. So after TSI, I was doing a lot of reflection on the time we spent together, and one of the key things that kept popping out for me was how we really need to hold people capable. And, Arn, as you described, Bill being kept in a crib cage at an institution, to me that, I don't know all the details, but to me it sounds like people just figuring or assuming that Bill isn't capable of anything. And then the story of the family that Bill first lived with, and, that fell in love with him and loved him to death. To me, that just speaks of people that saw something in Bill and really held him capable. And, Joyce, you've continued, and Arn, you've both continued on with that. And it's obvious in the work that Bill's doing today and his advocacy work. But just this idea of, we really need to start with the assumption that people are capable, or else they never will be capable.
That's really true, Eric. One of the things that I guess people who are listening to this podcast need to ask themselves is, what danger are they doing if they don't consider competence to start, or capacity, right? Compared to what harm are they doing if they do?
Right.
So the harm of not assuming capacity just leads to so many misconceptions and a whole different way of interacting with people.
Right.
Sorry, Eric.
Go ahead, Arn.
If you just even think about the fact that he was in the crib cage and he was banging his head on the bars, the assumption had to have been that Bill wasn't capable and was, I'm just going to say, kind of losing his mind or whatever, because he's banging his head on these bars, and normal people don't do that. But what he was trying to say was, I don't want to be in here. And they rectified that by putting a helmet on him so he could still continue to do what he was doing, and nobody was hearing him. And I know that people not hearing him has been the communication thing, especially with Joyce, because Joyce helped Bill develop that whole communication thing that has really opened up that whole world for Bill. And another sad part too is his education. Until he got to grade 9, he hadn't been taught really anything, I don't think, had he? And I just find that extremely remarkable that that not even the simplest things he was taught, and yet, as Joyce will tell you, it was incredible that the things that he could do without even having been taught.
Mm-hmm. The imagery and the metaphor, and I know in Bill's situation, Bill's life, this is not a metaphor, and it's the truth and reality. But for the rest of us, I think it serves as a strong metaphor that we can carry forward in our minds around this idea of holding people capable. If we start with the assumption that somebody's not capable, we're putting them in that cage.
Yep, for sure.
Right? And nobody deserves that. So
here's another question, Eric. It's what gives us the right to assume that somebody else doesn't have the capacity just because they look and act different?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question for everybody to reflect on. I don't think that anybody has the right. That's my opinion. So maybe it is a good opportunity to switch gears and switch back to kind of the continuation of Bill's story. So maybe Joyce, would you be able to pick that up for us and continue with that?
Bill and I got to know each other through school. I was his educational assistant, and at one point in time I had identified to the teacher that I didn't want to work with Bill because I really didn't know how to work with Bill, because I was new into the field and Bill was new to the school. And for the first time I ever told that story, Bill didn't talk to me for about 2 days because he was mad. But now, I guess now that he has heard that story a number of times, I think he understands why things happened. And I think it's given him an opportunity to think about how other people view him. So as Bill's educational assistant, I spent a lot of time with Bill, just allowing him to take the courses in school that he wanted to. He was very clear early on that segregation was not for him. He was in a segregated classroom, and every once in a while we'd look around and Bill had escaped, and we'd find him up in the science hall with the rest of the kids. So it was very clear that Bill didn't want to be in the segregated classroom. And so we found ways to get him into class. And early on, even in that role, Bill was seen as a leader for students at times when they didn't know how to move forward. Bill always had a way to move forward. So I think of Bill as a teacher. I think of Bill as a very wise man. And one of the really important things I think that Bill would like to get across to people is that Bill isn't someone who needs to be fixed. Bill is Bill, and Bill is here for a reason. And that reason, I think, is to allow people to identify with somebody who is different and stretch their personal boundaries a little bit. And Bill tries very often to get people to think about how they could do things a little differently. One of the things that I know Bill is really involved in, because he wants to make change, is he really wants to give back to the community that's given to him. So one of the things that he has done is he's become involved politically, and he's trying to make change within the political arena so that others will benefit from that change. I guess both Bill and I believe that we can't sit there and expect change to happen if we're not going to do something about it. So one of the things for Bill is, when you see Bill, you wouldn't expect him to do a lot of the things that he has done in his time. And sort of as we talked about earlier in terms of the seizure problem for Bill, he has now decided that his advocacy work is the most important. He's sort of forgiven all those nice things, of all the recreational things a lot of people will choose to do, like horseback riding and swimming and that. And he uses his energy just to do the advocacy work. And his advocacy work is about bringing about change for people, for full inclusion for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And I think, well, you mentioned the word inspiration earlier, Joyce, and what inspires me about Bill is his passion and dedication to advocacy and to being a leader, to spread the message that he wants to spread in terms of inclusion and awareness and starting to break down stigmas and fears that are out there for people with disabilities. And I definitely view Bill as a teacher. And the other reflection that I had after our time together at TSI was really a personal one in my own interaction with Bill. And so TSI is a Toronto Summer Institute's a 5-day conference, and it took me till I think it was day 3, or maybe late day 2, to come over and interact with Bill. And this was actually probably the 3rd time that I've met Bill. There was a couple of other events or conferences that we had been at together, and I might have maybe said hi in passing. But it was that 2nd or 3rd day that I came over and asked how I could communicate with Bill to have a conversation. And I really thought long and hard about what took me so long to come over and talk to Bill. I knew that just through other interactions that Bill was sharing in kind of sharing circles or there was an opportunity to contribute, Bill was contributing. But it took me a long time to approach Bill. And after reflecting on it, it was fear. Just my own personal fear. And I think it's human nature, human tendency to judge people that are different than we are. And it's interesting because I've had a lot of contact and experience with people with disabilities. And maybe the difference is that I don't have a lot of experience with or contact with people that are nonverbal. So that might have been part of that fear for me. But just reflecting on that and being real with myself. And I think that's a common stigma or barrier that we face and challenge the people with disabilities and that Bill faces on a daily basis.
I always thought too that it was so hard for Bill and for other people when somebody would come up, and honestly want to talk to Bill and say hello. There isn't a response back, and so the conversation ends very quickly because there is no response. And again, it all depends how Bill's feeling and stuff too, whether he's able to communicate in any different way. But most of the time, people don't want to take the time or can't take the time to give Bill the opportunity to communicate because it takes longer.
Yeah, there isn't the initial, usually if you go up to somebody and say hi, they'll respond with a hi. There isn't even some kind of an acknowledgement from Bill on his side that he has entered into that realm with you. It really means we really need to stop what we're doing and really focus on how are we going to get Bill to communicate with the person that's just come up to him.
Right. So, and
it's so difficult. That's so different from the way normal conversations happen.
Mm-hmm. So for people that want to communicate with Bill, maybe if they get over that internal fear that they may have and have the courage to come over to and try to have a conversation, what should they do, or is there any suggestions that you might have?
So I guess, first of all, Eric, I did want to say thank you for acknowledging that there was fear there, because that's an important piece. And I think a lot of people do feel that fear. In terms of what works best for the communication is being able to give time, making sure that if you're going, I guess it takes a while for Bill to become comfortable in terms of conversation as well. Because too many times I think, and I'm not sure, Bill, hopefully you can answer this question. I'm not sure if past experience has caused Bill sort of to turn people off as well, because there isn't that follow-up, right? There'll be a hi, goodbye sort of thing and nothing deeper. So lots of times there's situations where the trust and that openness has to sort of develop.
Yeah, I think too that Bill has this way of kind of gleaning the sincerity from people, like with like almost instantly, I guess I would say. And if he doesn't feel that somebody is sincere, then won't give them that much of time of the day, if you know what I mean.
Right. Just like anybody else, right? Like if somebody tries to have a conversation with me and I detect that, you know, they have some sort of ulterior motive or they're not being sincere, then I tend to disengage as well.
Like I guess here, just a thought came into my mind here, and that is to say that it took Bill 6 months really of being together with me to allow me to even rub his back. That's how insular he was, right? In his own little world. And so, you know, when you think about taking 6 months to allow somebody to rub your back, that takes a lot of time. So in terms of the communication, you sort of need to be in Bill's space and sit with him for a while and be in his space, and then the communication flows a whole lot better.
Right. So yeah, I'm just hearing be patient, be sincere, and give it some time. From my experience, specifically with Bill, was just talking with Joyce and Arn and asking, how do I best communicate with Bill? And you guys were more than willing to help me understand that and to help Bill and I interact.
I guess one of the things that Bill will say is that one of the first things is that we have to learn to slow down, because we move in this fast-paced verbal world, and that's not Bill's world at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it's to slow down and take that time and take that time to be in his space, really, and to allow that space to open up, because I think part of what happens when a person is nonverbal, there's a lot of, it will be unspoken communication that happens between people. And that's about getting the vibe of how things are. And you can't do that just by passing by. Right.
And I view that as a gift that Bill is giving other people.
Yeah.
Right.
And even between Bill and Joyce, they have, I don't know if you would call it like a ESP type thing, but Joyce will pick up on, let's say if Bill's going to have a big seizure or something, whether, you know, Bill sends her a message or whatever, there just seems to be that much deeper connection there too somehow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And, you know, I also wanted to say too, and I think it's important for people to know, I know the discussion is about nonverbal, but Bill is legally deaf and legally blind. And most of the time he blows my mind with the way that he can hear and the way that he can see. And I think there's many things that are really unexplained in what we know as human beings. But somehow I think he is somehow further advanced than we are, just in things like when we're walking. Bill doesn't walk quite as good as he used to, but he would come up to a curb and he would be lifting his leg like he knows that there's a curb there. And I'm wondering, well, how does he know that it's there? Is it because I changed my step or my body language, so then he figures that out, or does he really see something? And yeah, it's just a little food for thought, I guess, that I know different times I have whispered to him in a meeting or something, do you want a drink of water or something? And he hears me. And so when a person's legally deaf, I don't really believe that they should be able to hear that. So anyways, he just has some special things about him.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
That's just the part about being in his space and being part of him.
Right. And taking the time to understand him, right? And hold him capable. Yep. Right. So important. So So Bill's a disability advocate, and I'm curious, what is the world that Bill envisions for people with disabilities?
So because it does take some time to get this out, we did sort of do some prep on these questions for you.
Yeah, perfect.
So
Thank you.
Bill wrote down where we are seen as who we are, not what is different. People have been excluded for so long, which means people see the difference first. When people are truly included, others get to experience who we really are.
So not seeing people for the disability, but for seeing people who they are. And that's such an important message, Bill. So thank you for sharing that. And another question that I asked you previously is how can we help to support that vision?
So Bill's comment there was the best way is giving people the opportunity to spend time with all people so that there's an opportunity to really get comfortable with one another.
Like we were talking about earlier, just trying to, for people to give people that are different an opportunity to spend time with them, to get to know them. And a lot of it, I mean, for me, it was getting over that fear, and I'm sure for others, it's that same thing. And Arn, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that Joyce and I certainly have had lots of different discussions, and I think that one of the biggest things that we think that needs to happen in society is that the integration starts right from kindergarten or daycare or whatever, because the longer that kids are with each other, then they become more accepted.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, right? I mean, if we have segregation in schools, what are we teaching kids?
Right.
Exactly.
Right? We're teaching them that, those kids that have disabilities, whether they're visible or not, that are in a segregated classroom, we're highlighting that they're different. And we're teaching kids that they should be kept separate.
Right.
And I think the other negative to segregation is, and I think Bill showed Joyce that he wants to be a part of the regular science class and to learn what's going on over there. And there's a saying that goes, we are the product of the 5 people that we're closest to and spend the most time with. Right. So by being in a normal classroom, Bill would be around 5, students that would have per se a more capability, or they would be, just learning at a regular level. So that gives Bill the opportunity to increase his capability, but just by simply being around those other students rather than being segregated in a classroom with other people with disabilities that are all being treated the same as not being capable. Right.
Right.
Right. Eric, I think it's important if Joyce could just quickly talk about, I believe they lived in Dundalk at the time.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Sure.
So in Bill's last year of high school, we were trying to think of what he would do when he was finished high school. And so we had Bill go into the kindergarten in the community and spend time during their activity time so that the kids would see Bill and have the opportunity to use his communication folder to communicate and to see that there are different ways. And we were walking down the street one day, and a little boy came, and he was dragging his mom closer to Bill, and the mom is dragging the boy away. And so, as mom is dragging the boy away, he's going, no, mom, it's okay. This is Bill. He comes to my class. And so exactly what we wanted to have happen happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it really brings to mind one of the things that good friend Judith Snow said. She said, society will change when I'm in it. And it's very true.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, a perfect example, right? And probably when the mom went to school, either people with disabilities weren't there or they're in a segregated classroom. So that's her belief. That's what she was taught. right?
Right.
So, I mean, it's a perfect example of what having contact with Bill does, right, for kids, or
The child didn't see Bill as anything different than being Bill, and the mom saw Bill for being different,
right,
and was trying to keep her son from that exposure, I guess.
Right.
Little did she know that we had figured this out ahead.
Right. And Bill also has an initiative or a program to help people experience what it's like to have a disability. Would you be able to share a little bit about that?
We sure can. So I have to go back a little bit in history, and we're members of Family Alliance Ontario, and we were at a Family Alliance meeting, and the people in the room, mostly parents and family members, were saying, why isn't the government listening to us? We know what we need in terms of support. We know how best to do it. Why won't the government listen to us? And Bill's comment at that time was, have they ever been made to live our life? And that thought festered and festered and festered for a long time. So it took about 7 years, and we came up with this brilliant idea. We think it's brilliant anyway. And that is that we will invite people to acquire disability and walk a mile. And part of that came out of the poem that Bill wrote too, where he said, people just need to, walk beside me and walk in my shoes so that they'll understand what it is that I go through. And so with that, we started it, and that's 10 years ago. So this is our 10th anniversary. And we invite people to acquire disability. Sometimes, depends if we're feeling charitable, we'll let them choose. Otherwise, we'll just give it to them, just like anybody else who has a disability. It's sort of just given there. You didn't choose it. And then we ask them to walk that mile, and we have them walk behind Bill. And it's been really eye-opening for a lot of people. And I think that comes to Bill's thoughts about how the experience will lead to understanding, which will lead to change.
Right. And it's for that, giving that people the experience of having a disability. It could be, being blind or deaf or mobility impaired.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We try and look at, how best we can simulate a lot of things. We can't simulate all the disabilities, but even if it's just one or two, right? And then we make sure people are safe, because we pair people up and then they switch halfway through so that they get to experience being the person and also supporting the person. Right. So everybody stays safe. And then we end it all up with a nice barbecue, and we have some good chats, and we go around till the next year.
Right on. So how can people support Bill's Walk a Mile in Bill's Shoes initiative?
So I will be upfront right now. His website, we do have a website for Bill, and we try and post when the next walk is. And really the thing that we ask people to do with this is we try and keep the participation fee like at $10 so everybody can participate, because we do need to pay for some expenses that come out of it. And then we ask people to look for sponsors to help, just like you would do in a Terry Fox run, whatever. Mm-hmm. And what we do with any leftover proceeds goes to an organization called Reach for the Rainbow. And Bill, that's another piece of Bill's giving back to community, because Reach for the Rainbow enabled him to go to camp with his peers, just to an ordinary camp with the support he needed. And so he gives back by helping them raise some funds. That's and awesome. Helping that program carry on.
Excellent. That's awesome. And so when the website's up, we'll definitely link to it so people can check that out in the show notes or on the blog. And I think it's also an important idea that other people can take and use in their own ways as well, to help people that don't have a disability to experience what it's like to have a disability and to get that level of understanding.
One thing that I wanted to mention, just as a tag onto what you're just talking about, is we've also done it with parliamentarians. And I was just actually almost appalled that some of them wouldn't even participate. And, again, there's a fear there. What are they going to do to me or whatever? But, on the flip side of that, most of the parliamentarians were eager to go along with what we were presenting to them. And so, we've tried to get it to the highest places, I guess, where change can happen. And I really do think that those people did appreciate that experience as well.
And that's part of the advocacy piece that Bill likes to do a lot.
That's incredible. It's important to help parliamentarians or people in power that can help to make that change, help them understand the experience, right, of what folks like Bill are going through on a daily basis.
Right. And so in terms of what Bill foresees in terms of change is he wants changes to be there so life is better for everybody, not just people with disabilities. So if you think about automatic doors, how that helps somebody in a wheelchair with a walker, a mom with kids in the stroller, or she's been shopping and arms are full and she's still got the toddler that she's dragging along, and delivery men with their carts and things. So it helps everybody.
The elderly.
Right.
Yeah. So
and we're all living longer, right?
Yeah.
So yes. I love that. I love that vision. Life is better for everybody.
Yeah. And I think that's what he really, that's what he really tries to evoke when he's talking about change.
Yeah.
And I think what everybody really needs to think about at some point in time is that you never know when you're going to end up with a disability yourself. Just speaking for myself, through diabetes, I ended up with a amputation. And, up till that time, very healthy and active and all that type of thing. So it can happen relatively quickly. Joyce has her ailments as well, that she's not moving as well as she once did either. And so, whether it's an accident that happens or something like that, things can change overnight and you can be thrown into the world of disability. And I think if people start to pay more attention to that whole world, maybe before those things happen, like you said earlier, we're living longer. So even as people get older, there is a certain amount of disability, even in just getting around, just because you're, older and more feeble and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, such an important point, right? I mean, if we have our health, we take it for granted until, we don't have it or something goes wrong, or, even if it's not, regarded as a disability. But such an important point, Arn. So I just have one last question, and you can all answer this one. And I gave this one to Bill in advance. So maybe let's start with Bill. So Bill, if you had a billboard that you could show to put on display for the entire world, what would you put on that billboard?
So for Bill, he would put a picture of his Walk a Mile in My Shoe event with a caption that reads, "Experience leads to understanding, which can be the catalyst for change." So that would be his billboard.
Beautifully put, Bill. Excellent. And how about yourself, Joyce?
Man, there were a lot of things that were going through my mind with that one. So I came up with, "My world is one of love, optimism, and acceptance, where we care deeply for one another. Healthy communities include us all."
Awesome. Okay. We're gonna need a big billboard for that one.
Yeah.
And Arn, what would you put on your billboard?
I wish I had some, ultimate wisdom type thing that was coming to my mind. I'm sure I could come up with one, but I hadn't even really thought about it because I thought this was just about Bill. But
now I'm putting you on the
spot. If I think of something, I can send it to you, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. Yeah, well, I mean, it's been a pleasure having the three of you on the podcast today, and I'm super grateful that Bill, that you put the time into thinking about some of the questions that I asked, and to share that with the world, and to share your story. And it's an important one. And as Joyce said, it's inspirational. It's not inspirational in the way that, looking at, hey, look what I can do, even though I've got a disability. It's inspirational in the way that you carry yourself, and the way that you're making change in the world, and the way that you're a leader, and in the way that you're a teacher. And that's what I really appreciate about you, Bill. And Joyce and Arn, I really appreciate that, you do hold Bill capable, and you are that integrated part of his life, and also for making the change that you're making in this world. So super grateful for that. And if we could, I'd also love maybe if you could say a few words in closing here. But Joyce, I'm not sure if you have Bill's poem with you there, but that might be a nice way to end the podcast. If you could maybe.
It would be. Just before we do that, I just wanted to capture something that you had said about the five, how we're the product of the five people around us.
Yeah.
It's always been my thought that in terms of segregation, in terms of school, if we continue to segregate people, then they can only aspire to the greatest that's in that room. Mm-hmm. But if they're out in the normal, I hate to use the word normal, but if they're in the entire school population, then they can aspire to something much greater because there's dreams that are created. And if you would have told me when I first got to know Bill that he would be a torchbearer for the Olympics, I would have told you you were nuts. So part of that, he earned that right because of the work that he does. And it was the most amazing experience to be part of that here in Canada. To be part of, I think for me, it's really important to say that Bill has taken me on roads I would never have traveled before. And so his role as a teacher is huge for me.
Mm-hmm.
And Eric, I just want to...
I was going to say, and Joyce, you've taken Bill on roads that he wouldn't have traveled either if it wasn't for you. So I think it's a symbiotic relationship.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome.
So I do have Bill's poem here, and he wrote this back in 1998, and it's still very relevant today, and it's entitled Understanding People. Okay. Understanding people. A set of standards by which to judge. To their friends they give a nudge when they see me come their way. They stop and walk the other way, or even worse, they stop and stare, as if I'm stupid and unaware. If only they could know that I care. How people view me, it's just not fair. I feel the very same as others do. They should try and walk in my shoe. Life's not easy when the body that you own was given to you broken down. They may be mean, they may be cruel, they may be bad, but most of all, they just don't understand. With some time and special guidance, we can have a great alliance. For an hour or for a day, we all need friends along the way. So when you see me come along, try not to focus on what is wrong. I am a person just like you, who needs and deserves a good friend too. Just walk beside me straight and tall, and be the friend that I can call when I am lonely and afraid. Just remember what I've said. All you need is to understand. Do not judge, just take my hand.
I love that, Bill, and it's a pleasure to walk beside you, and I'm sure that Joyce and Arn say the same thing, and as do our listeners of the podcast. And I'm excited to be on this journey with you to make life better for everybody. So I'm super grateful for the three of you coming on the podcast today.
Wonderful. Thanks, Eric, and thanks for doing this. This is important.
Yeah, my pleasure. Okay, we'll talk soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
You look like a news broadcaster. You do. You look good.
A big thank you goes out to Bill, Arn, and Joyce for joining us on the podcast today. And it was really a delight to be able to share Bill's story and Joyce's story and Arn's story as part of Team Bill. Really some important insights around where we start from and the beliefs that we start from when supporting an individual with a disability, starting from an assumption of that person is capable rather than starting from an assumption that the person's not capable, because in the end, the outcome can be drastically different, and we can do a lot of harm if we don't start from the assumption that the person is capable rather than they are not capable. So really deep insight there. And also, I hope you had the opportunity to reflect on how you perceive people with disabilities, much like I had the opportunity to reflect on how I perceived Bill and how that was preventing me from having a conversation with Bill due to my own fears. So I hope that maybe brought some thoughts into your mind around how you carry yourself and what may be preventing you from interacting with people in your life. And it just could be people that are different from you. So that could be different race, different age, whatever that might be. So again, thank you to Bill, Joyce, and Arn for joining this podcast today. And if housing is something that you're working on, feel free to go to the website and get the free download on creating your home. So there's this great workbook that's going to help guide you through creating your vision and starting to implement your vision for what your home looks like. So go on over to the website. It's empoweringability.org. And I think you'll get a lot of value out of that. I'd like to thank all of our listeners that have left us a review on iTunes. Your reviews help me understand what I'm doing well, what I can improve on the podcast, what you want to hear. So it's great feedback that you're providing, so please continue to do so. Also, by leaving a 5-star review, it helps other people find the podcast. So thanks so much for those reviews and keep them coming. Next week on the podcast, we have a very knowledgeable and respected lawyer out of Toronto practicing law around disability. And Brendan comes on the podcast to talk to us about some of the questions that he gets asked most frequently. And those two things are first one around estate planning is where we really focus most of our time. And the second one is around capacity and capability. So we have a really great conversation around that. I think you're going to learn a lot about it, and it'll get you thinking about planning for you and your own family. So thanks for joining us today, and hope to see you next week.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. Visit us at empoweringability.org for more podcasts and resources to help you and your loved ones impacted by disability build a full and meaningful life.